Four women of faith walked into the Andean forest on a crisp September morning in 1980. None would ever return alive. What happened in those woods would remain a mystery for nearly 3 decades, until a faithful priest's persistence uncovered a truth more haunting than anyone could have imagined. Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone you cared about vanished without a trace? How long would you keep searching? How far would you go to uncover the truth? In the shadow of the towering Andes Mountains lies the remote village of Santa Clara. For generations, the local monastery had served as both spiritual anchor and community pillar. But on September 12, 1980, something unprecedented occurred. 4 nuns, Sisters Magdalena, Teresa, Claudia, Isabella, and Veronica, embarked on what should have been a routine pilgrimage to the mountain shrine of San Miguel. They never returned. The mystery of these 4 women would haunt the village for 28 years. Their disappearance left no bodies, no evidence of struggle, no answers. Only questions that echoed through time until 2008, when Father Joaquin Reyes stumbled upon a forgotten journal hidden within the monastery walls. If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and the power of dedication, subscribe for more true crime stories that challenge our understanding of tragedy and resilience. Sister Valentina Morales moved through the convent's corridors with quiet authority. At 52, her face carried laugh lines earned through decades of genuine connection with her community. Orphaned at 7, raised within these very walls, she understood both the convent's written rules and unspoken codes. Villagers sought her counsel for matters spiritual and practical, drawn to her uncanny ability to make each person feel truly heard. Sister Delfina Ochoa's hands bore the permanent green stains of her herbal work. At 47, she maintained the convent's medicinal garden, preserving knowledge passed down through centuries. Each morning, locals lined up outside her window with ailments ranging from fevers to failing hearts. Her remedies combined prayer with practical science, her faith in both equally unwavering. Sister Pilar Quintana, 39, approached God through intellect. The bookshelves in her small cell bent under the weight of theological texts in 4 languages. Her glasses perpetually slid down her nose as she bent over ancient manuscripts or corrected student essays. In the village school, she transformed mathematics into poetry and history into living drama, her students hanging on her every word. Sister Beatriz Fuentes, 35, communicated through color and form. Her religious artwork adorned the chapel walls, saints whose faces reflected the indigenous features of local villagers. Her hands perpetually carried traces of paint, her habit bearing the evidence of inspiration that couldn't wait for proper preparations. Even her prayers seemed to form visual patterns in the air. Sister Renata Gutierrez, at 26, embodied the convent's future. The youngest by nearly a decade, she brought modern ideas tempered with deep spiritual devotion. Where others saw tradition, she saw opportunity. Her energy pulled the convent forward, while her reverence kept it anchored to its roots. She led the children's choir, their voices carrying down the mountainside each Sunday. 4 times yearly, the sisters undertook a pilgrimage to the sacred grotto hidden deep within the forest. Local legend claimed the cave had sheltered the Holy Family during their flight to Egypt, a belief scholars dismissed but villagers embraced. Inside the grotto, a natural spring produced water believed to possess healing properties. Father Mateo Solano served as the bridge between the convent and the diocese. His small parish church stood in the village center, but he spent much of his time at Santa Esperanza. At 63, his once black cassock had faded to charcoal, much like his once black hair. His relationship with the sisters balanced professional respect with genuine friendship, particularly with Sister Valentina, whose counsel he valued above his bishops. September 17, 1980, arrived in Miraflores with unusual clarity. Inside the convent, the sisters rose in darkness for matins. Their voices blended in prayer, rising and falling in the rhythm that had remained unchanged for centuries. They gathered in the convent courtyard as the first light touched the bell tower. Sister Delphina distributed small cloth pouches of dried herbs, protection against mountain sickness. Sister Renata led them in a departure hymn, her clear voice echoing against the stone walls. Sister Pilar carried a small notebook, already making observations about the unusual atmospheric conditions. Sister Valentina checked their provisions one final time. "Take these." Emilio Vega, the village baker, pressed still warm rolls into Sister Renata's hands as they passed his shop. "The mountain air makes one hungry." The youngest nun thanked him with a smile that would haunt him for decades. Near the fountain, a group of school children surrounded Sister Pilar. "Will you bring back stories from the grotto?" asked little Maria Fuentes. The intellectual nun knelt to the child's level. "I'll bring back something better than stories," she promised. "I'll bring back questions." She made the sign of the cross over each child's forehead, the last blessing any of them would receive from her hands. The sisters carried modest supplies: bread and cheese, dried fruit, water flasks. Each wore her simple habit, sturdy walking shoes, and a woolen shawl against the mountain chill. Around their waists hung rosaries. In their pockets rested small prayer books. Sister Delphina carried additional pouches of medicinal herbs. Sister Beatrice brought a small sketch pad and charcoal. Nothing unusual, nothing excessive. The pilgrimage followed a well-established route. The sisters would spend several hours in prayer at the sacred site, collect water from the spring, and return by the western path. They had made this journey countless times. They expected to return before sunset prayers at 6 p.m. By mid-afternoon, the unusual weather had transformed. Father Mateo checked his pocket watch repeatedly as he taught catechism to village children, his lessons growing more distracted as the hours passed. At 5 p.m., he positioned himself at the western trailhead, watching for the familiar outline of habits against the forest green. By 6 p.m., he paced. By 7 p.m., with the mountain now completely obscured by what appeared to be fog rather than clouds, he returned to the village to question those who had seen the sisters that morning. Diego Ortiz remembered his warning about the strange clouds. Emilio the baker recalled Sister Renata's unusual hesitation before taking his bread. The schoolchildren spoke of Sister Pilar's promise to bring back questions. As night fell, an unnatural silence descended upon Miraflores. At 9:17 p.m., Father Mateo rang the church bell. Not the measured toll for prayer, but the rapid, urgent peal that called for assembly. As villagers gathered in the square, lanterns in hand, the priest's face appeared carved from stone. "The sisters have not returned," he announced, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "We must find them tonight." The forest consumed them. 47 men and women plunged into darkness armed with lanterns and faith, their voices calling names that the woods swallowed without echo. The trees stood unnaturally still that night. No wind disturbed their branches. No leaves rustled underfoot. The searchers described it afterward as walking through a painting of a forest rather than a living one. Father Mateo led the main group along the western path, while Diego Ortiz guided a smaller team up the eastern route the sisters had taken that morning. They moved with the urgency of people who still believed rescue possible, who had not yet contemplated worse fates. By dawn, exhaustion forced their return to Miraflores, where the provincial police had arrived in 2 dust-covered jeeps. Captain Alejandro Mendoza took command with metropolitan efficiency that immediately clashed with village rhythms. His officers spread maps across tables, marked search quadrants, and spoke into crackling radios that connected them to the regional headquarters in Cuzco. "For nuns don't simply vanish," Mendoza declared. "People leave traces." Yet traces proved elusive. For 7 consecutive days, the search expanded. The police established a methodical grid system. Volunteers combed each sector with military precision. Mendoza requisitioned 4 German shepherds from the National Police Force, dogs specially trained for mountain rescue and human tracking. The animals refused to enter the forest. They pulled against their leashes, whining and backing away from the tree line with hackles raised. When handlers forced them forward, the dogs flattened themselves against the ground, eyes wild with fear. On day 4, a government helicopter thundered over the village, circling the mountain in ever-widening patterns while observers scanned the terrain through binoculars. 300 yards away, a single shoe belonging to Sister Delphina rested perfectly upright in the middle of the path, not fallen on its side but placed deliberately, containing a small pile of salt. Most disturbing was the spring at the sacred grotto itself. The water that had flowed for centuries had stopped completely, the stone basin now holding only a dark residue that, when analyzed weeks later, it contained compounds unknown to the National Laboratory. Others pointed to the forest itself. Puma attacks had increased that year throughout the region. Could predators have overwhelmed the women? But where was the blood, the signs of struggle, the scattered remains that such violence would leave behind? By October, national media descended upon Miraflores. Television crews positioned reporters in front of the convent. Photographers captured villagers' grief in stark black and white images for magazine spreads. A famous psychic arrived uninvited, claiming she could communicate with the missing women, only to flee after allegedly experiencing terrifying visions during a night spent in Sister Valentina's cell. Only Father Mateo continued climbing the mountain daily, returning each evening muddy and silent, his face growing more hollow as weeks became months, as answers remained as absent as the women themselves. What do you think happened to the 4 nuns? Share your theories in the comments below. 28 years after the murders, Miraflores faced transformation. The government announced plans for a hydroelectric dam that would submerge the forest valley, including the chapel pathway. Environmental activists countered with concerns about disrupted ecosystems. Indigenous representatives spoke of ancestral grounds that would vanish beneath reservoir waters. The village remained divided, but construction preparations began regardless. Father Solano, now 72, watched bulldozers clear access roads through his forest. The chapel would be relocated, but his path, would disappear forever. The preliminary team documented a cave entrance expanding into a tunnel system that extended deep into the mountain. Their flashlight beams revealed primitive tool marks on the walls. This was no natural formation, but something manufactured, something hidden. When authorities were notified, Father Solano appeared at the site within hours. Despite protests about his age and the dangerous conditions, he insisted on joining the full exploration team. "I've waited 28 years, he told Police Captain Fuentes. "I'll crawl if necessary." The cave mouth widened into a passage tall enough to stand in. Water trickled somewhere in the darkness, each drop echoing through stone chambers. The air hung heavy with mineral scents and decay. The team advanced cautiously, documenting each turn and chamber. Father Solano remained silent, his expression hidden behind his breathing mask as they ventured deeper. The tunnel forked, then forked again. Lead archaeologist Dr. Reyes documented the turns with fluorescent markers. 200 meters inside the mountain, the passage opened into a chamber roughly 4 meters across. Flashlight beams swept over the uneven floor, catching something that reflected light differently than stone. "There," called one of the technicians, directing his beam toward a dark corner. The light revealed a small metal object partially embedded in the packed earth floor. Dr. Reyes approached slowly, kneeling to examine it without touching. "It appears to be," she began, then paused. Father Solano moved closer, his breathing audible through his mask. His eyes, rheumy with age but suddenly focused with terrible clarity, recognized the object immediately. A silver crucifix. Small, tarnished by time but unmistakable. His hand trembled as he reached toward it, then stopped. "Sister Magdalena," he whispered. "She never removed it." Captain Fuentes stepped forward. "Father, please step back. This is now." But Father Solano had already moved his light beam further into the chamber, where it caught something else. Something that had been waiting in darkness for 28 years. Something that made the hardened police captain fall silent mid-sentence. The exploration team's lights converged on the far wall, illuminating what Father Solano had feared finding for nearly 3 decades. The truth had waited in darkness for 28 years. 4 sets of remains arranged not randomly, but with purpose, a perfect circle, heads pointed inward like spokes on a wheel. Their habits, remarkably preserved in the dry cave air, still draped their skeletal forms. By each set of remains lay personal effects: wooden rosaries, communion wafers turned to stone, for prayer books positioned open to different passages. A flashlight revealed the pages still legible, each open to verses about light breaking through darkness. They survived the initial collapse, Dr. Marquez explained to Father Solano. The evidence suggests weeks, not days. The geological survey confirmed what locals had whispered for years. Spring of 1980 had brought freak thunderstorms to Miraflores. Lightning had struck the mountainside directly above the forgotten mining tunnel, causing a collapse that sealed the entrance completely. Yet official search records showed no exploration of cave systems. The nuns had vanished into earth no one thought to look beneath. Around the circle, the women had arranged their prayer beads in intricate patterns across the floor, not random scatterings of desperate hands, but deliberate mandalas growing more complex with distance from their circle, as if mapping their spiritual journey. The most haunting evidence came from the chamber walls. Initial markings showed desperate pleas, crude crosses, simplified maps of the passage that trapped them, marks tracking passing days. Sister Beatrice's final testament lay beneath her skeletal hand, scratched onto a small, smooth stone. Dehydration would have taken approximately 2 weeks, Dr. Marquez explained, examining mineral deposits in a skull. The positioning suggests none died alone. They remained together until the end. Most remarkable were 4 shallow depressions worn into the stone floor, knee prints from hours of communal prayer, perfectly aligned in their circle. Science could measure the minerals in bone, the composition of fabric, the physics of the collapse. But something in that chamber transcended measurement. They found light in absolute darkness, Father Solano whispered, touching the wall, etchings gently. All these years searching for violence, and I found something else entirely. The revelation brought no criminal to justice, no villain to condemn. Instead, it offered something Father Solano had never expected to find: peace. The discovery transformed Father Solano overnight. Witnesses described how he knelt among the remains for hours, touching nothing, speaking nothing, his weathered face a canvas of complex emotions, grief and wonder intertwined. When authorities permitted him to examine the preserved writings on the cave walls, something broke open within him. Few saw the moment it happened, but Dr. Herrera described it later. His hand touched the etching about light approaching. His eyes widened. Then he simply collapsed. Father Solano did wake on the 5th day, but the right side of his body remained paralyzed, his speech reduced to fragmented sounds that bore little resemblance to the eloquent sermons he once delivered. Yet his left hand retained its strength and purpose. His first written words, scrawled awkwardly across hospital stationery: "They found light. So have I." The community that had whispered about his obsession for decades rallied without hesitation. A rotation of villagers maintained constant presence at his bedside. When he returned to Miraflores after rehabilitation, parishioners had transformed the church office into accessible living quarters. Young volunteers took turns pushing his wheelchair through gardens planted where once he had paced alone. His notebook never left his lap. In it, he wrote continuously, not about mystery or crime, but about profound understanding. What I sought as violence was transformation. What I feared as murder was transcendence. What I mourned as loss was elevation. In spring 2011, 3 years after the discovery, gardeners found Father Solano in his wheelchair beneath the church's olive tree. His notebook lay open on his lap, pen still clutched in his left hand. His final written words, rendered in surprisingly steady script: "They waited for me all these years now. I joined their circle." At his funeral, over 600 people attended: former skeptics, officials who had dismissed him, villagers who had avoided his questions. Bishop Montoya, who had once urged him to abandon his search, spoke the eulogy. Some called it obsession. We now understand it was devotion. Before the waters claimed the valley, Miraflores commissioned a monument on the hillside above the future reservoir. 4 marble columns rose in a circle, their tops connecting to form a dome-like structure. When viewed from above, they cast a cross-shaped shadow that moved with the sun, a sundial marking not hours but seasons. The dedication ceremony in autumn 2009 drew over 2,000 people, including family members of the 4 nuns who had waited decades for answers. "My aunt chose a life of faith," said Elena Vasquez, Sister Beatrice's niece, finding that her faith never wavered, even in darkness. This knowledge changes everything. Professor Ignacio Fuentes, brother of Sister Magdalena, spoke through tears. "For 30 years, I imagined violence. Instead, I discovered transcendence. My anger has transformed to pride." The revelation reverberated through Miraflores like ripples across still water. The municipal building, once the convent, underwent renovation. Workers who had previously requested transfers now volunteered to restore the sisters' former quarters into a museum chronicling their lives rather than just their deaths. The village established Las Jimenez Scholarship Fund, providing education for young women pursuing religious vocations or humanitarian work. What began with 4 modest grants expanded to support 20 students annually across Latin America. Each year, before the anniversary of the discovery, hundreds gathered at the monument overlooking the reservoir. Boats ferried visitors to the memorial at dawn, where the first light through the marble columns created luminous patterns on the water below. Uncertainty corrodes faith, Father Martinez, Solano's successor, observed at the 5th anniversary gathering. Not because questions exist, but because we forget that answers might surprise us with grace rather than horror. The valley that claimed 4 lives now nourished the region with power and purpose. The dark mystery that haunted Father Solano for decades ultimately illuminated the community's path forward. Where 4 women once knelt in darkness, thousands now stood in light. Where confusion once divided a village, understanding now united a community. The nuns' final message, finding light in darkness, became Miraflores' enduring legacy, etched not just in marble, but in the transformed heart of a place that had learned to transform tragedy into meaning. What began as a mystery of violence revealed itself as a testament to human resilience. The 4 nuns of Miraflores were trapped without hope of rescue, found meaning in their final days not through despair, but through deepening faith. Their circle, discovered 28 years later, spoke not of fear, but of communion. Father Solano's unwavering dedication represents something profound about human nature, our need to know, to understand, to find meaning even when others counsel surrender. His obsession, once viewed as madness, proved to be wisdom. Some quests demand completion, regardless of cost. The transformed community of Miraflores now stands as living proof that closure, even delayed by decades, holds power to heal wounds time alone cannot touch. The village once defined by an unsolved tragedy now defines itself by the light found within that darkness. Perhaps the most powerful truth revealed in this story is that mysteries solved may bring both peace and pain, the comfort of knowing intertwined with the grief of what might have been. Yet in that complex emotion lies our most human quality, the courage to face truth, whatever form it takes. This story reminds us of the power of dedication and the human need for closure. If you found this story moving, please like this video, subscribe to JPX Story File, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What other unsolved mysteries would you like us to explore?